Welcome to another Airbrush Asylum video. In this tutorial series, I'm going to show you how I airbrushed this skull on a canvas. It's going to be spread over 3 parts, so be sure to check them all out. Let's get into part 1 right now. So I've printed my reference on some A4 copy paper, and using my X-Acto knife, I'm just cutting out the darker values of the eye sockets, the nostril, and all the other areas, the key points of the skull. So making some paper templates which are to scale so that I can utilize them instead of sketching out onto my canvas. So I'm just giving you a quick look at this. I'm not covering the whole process, but you get an understanding and you'll see which parts have been used throughout the next process of laying out the artwork. So my canvas measures 250 by 250 mil. It's already pre-primed, so I'm going straight on with a bone color. This is made up of sand and white mixed together with some reducer. So both of these are Trident Airbrush Paints. And using my HPCS Iwata Eclipse, I'm just base coating that canvas, so the entire area. And now I'm placing my paper template onto the canvas. Obviously I waited until that paint was dry. It doesn't take long to dry, so obviously depending on your weather conditions. If you need to speed up the drying, then just hold the air on your airbrush and the air will assist with the drying time. Now coming in with a transparent brown, so this is transparent base mixed with reducer, and then I've added the Trident brown to that. The Trident brown's quite a reddish brown, and that's the sort of color that I'm looking for, just to softly put in some of my initial shading. So you'll notice that I'm lifting up sections of the paper template, so I've cut them deliberately so that I can easily lift them up, and you'll see now that that's almost done. I've just forgotten that eye socket, so I'm going to spray that in now. Okay, so now I'm going with a slightly darker tone, and this is the sepia. So this is mixed with reducer. So just carefully following my reference and putting in those darker values. I'm keeping in mind that I'm still going to come in with a darker tone, which the next one will be a transparent black. But this sepia is now just blending out some of those shadows. And by putting in the cracks and all the other key little texture pieces, that's helping me to identify the other areas surrounding that section when I start to airbrush this freehand as I go on throughout the video series. So you can see how it looks now. So that sepia has now given it a lot more of a 3D element. So now we're going to further darken some of those shadows using transparent black. So this is transparent base mixed with reducer obviously and some black. And for this tone I am using my CMSB Iwata Micron. This runs a 0.18mm needle nozzle setup. And if you're interested in getting any more information on any of the products used within this video, then I'll put some links in the description below to make it easier for you to check them out. And if you're interested, you can also purchase through those links, and those affiliate links do help support this channel. So continuing to render these key sections. So while the mask is on there, any sort of real defined shading, I'm utilizing those paper masks to create that. And remember, you can always go back and reuse your paper templates. I also printed out a couple extra to scale just so that I had some backups, so that if you want to cut other areas out, or if this particular template deteriorates, then you can go ahead and use that, and you can be sure that everything's at the correct scale. I do hope that you're enjoying this video so far. If this is the first time to the channel, then welcome. For all our regular viewers, welcome back. And by all means, if you are enjoying it, feel free to hit subscribe, tap on that bell icon, and that will notify you every time I put out new content. And if you feel that this video would be helpful to someone else, then share it out, and let's build this airbrushing community together. Okay, so now that all the paper templates are completed and the key features are in place, I'm now going to begin to render the artwork. You'll notice that I'm using some freehand templates just to get my sharp edges. So you'll see that throughout the video. I've got some texture templates that I'll use as well. And I'm now coming in with a burnt umber. This is mixed with reducer, and this particular color is by Createx Illustration Colors. And what I'm going to do now is just freehand in all of the key details and shading, and trying to leave the highlighted areas, because we're going to get to that later. But I'm effectively using this tone now as if it's the only tone that I'm going to use. So I want to add in all my really tiny cracks, basically anything that I see in the reference, and all the shaded areas, and I want to develop that three-dimensional look within the painting. If I need some really sharp defined edges, then I will utilize my freehand shields. If you feel that you don't have the right shields to be able to do that, then by all means go back, grab your paper template, cut out the relevant section, and you can use that. The airbrush that I'm using for this particular tone is the GSI Krios PS770. Again, I'll have a link to that particular product in the description. This runs a 0.18mm needle nozzle setup, so nice and fine. So again, further building my shadows and the texturing, so a bit of stippling work there with the airbrush. So I want to get as much of this texture in just using the airbrush at this stage, and I'll come in with the texture templates later on. You'll notice that I'm utilizing some of my fire tool templates here to get some of these sharp defined edges. So they're not just designed to create fire. Obviously that's what they were intended for, but you can utilize them for all sorts of applications. I even use them if I ever have to paint a portrait or just to get a nice sharp defined edge on a curve. Well, there's plenty of different shapes within that can be handy. So some of the cracking within the eye sockets there, a bit more of the bone fragments damaged. So doing all that with this burnt umber. So this skull tutorial, I've done plenty of others, but this one is more intended to focus on, learning how to create these bone textures and all the damages and the fractures within the bone, and to give you a more realistic finished product, rather than some of the other stylized skulls that I've done in the past, which are, in amongst fire and, just more basic sort of stuff. This is sort of a level up from there. So I thought this tutorial will be helpful if you've watched the initial ones and you sort of got the feeling of how to render a skull. Well, then this is taking it to that next level. So I do hope that you're enjoying it. So you can really start to see that it's starting to shape the design, that I've got a lot of the shading in the eye sockets, and I'm just working through the nostril now. You'll notice I've grabbed a piece of the original paper template and cut that out to make another freehand shield, just to get some of those key areas nice and sharp. And it just makes it easier to know how to accurately represent those parts within the nostril bone there. And if you're not as confident in rendering the artwork in a freehand sense as I'm doing at the moment, when I say freehand, there's not a lot of other sketching around those key areas that I initially laid out with the paper template, then take a bit more time, maybe utilize some of the extra paper template copies that you've made and cut out extra sections of the design. It is going to take you a bit longer, but then that way you'll get a more accurate representation, and in a sense you'll get that sketch. The other thing that you could do is also draw in any of the other details, whether you use a projector for that or you sort of carbon copy straight onto the canvas itself. When I say carbon copy, I mean, you know, draw on the back of it, place the reference on top, line it all up if you've already airbrushed in some of those key areas, and then transfer it on that way. So you may need to sort of put something underneath the canvas so that you got sort of a hard surface to transfer those lines on. But if you sort of do the old school method where you rub over the top, it will transfer the grey lead or chalk or whatever you want to use onto the surface for you. So really moving in between, utilizing that freehand template and also freehand airbrushing, but also, you know, heavily saturating some of those darker shaded areas. Again, just follow that reference. That's going to tell you what you need to do. And you can apply this particular method to any particular skull reference. So just jump on Google, search realistic skull images or realistic human skull, and or even if you're doing an animal skull, all these principles will remain the same. So I hope it's a helpful tutorial series that you can utilize time and time again. Okay, so moving up to the cranium area, and start to detail that as well. Added a few more cracks in, as you can see, and the artwork's really shaping up now. Even with just this burnt umber complete, you can really get the whole look of how the artwork's going to appear when it's completed. And just that balance of those real sharp defined edges with the softer airbrushing and texturing works really well to give a more realistic appearance. I'm also going to use a bit of brush in this particular artwork, as well as obviously texture templates, just to create a bit of a balance of that that sharpness, softness, all mixed together to create those textures. So adding a few more textures to the cranium. So just using my airbrush freehand up close and further away. And we're pretty much wrapping up part 1 of this video. Be sure to check out part 2. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you again very, very soon. Bye for now.